Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
All right, welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones, and we have a whole lot of action to get you guys caught up on for the Ducks. We're going to talk about the games this past week. The Ducks ended up winning 2 out of 3. We'll also preview the games coming up. We've got news to talk about as well as far as Getzlaf and Thompson, some practice news today that we'll get to. A little bit of Troy Terry news, USA and the World Junior Championship, so we'll cover that as well. And some other little updates around the league as well. So with that, we'll get to the games this week, Eddie. This was the week that the Ducks played 3 games without Ryan Getzlaf. He had that lower body injury towards the end of the game against Philadelphia. So the Ducks headed into the game against Detroit. They brought up Chris Wagner, and they played this game. And this was a good game for the Ducks. They played much better defensively as opposed to how they did against Philadelphia, giving up those 55 shots. But in this one, they limited Detroit's chances. And they won this game 2-0, Eddie. Ritchie and Casse with the goals and Gibson with the shutout.
Yeah, and again, they're getting goals from, guys that, not the top guys, not Raquel, not Perry, not Kessler. So being able to win a game like that is key, and that line obviously led the way in this one. But again, a nice game again by Gibson. This time facing a lot less shots, more than half that he faced against Philadelphia. He only faced 23 in this one. Like you said, facing about 55 in the Philadelphia game. So a better defensive effort from them in this one. In a more even game, they took advantage of the opportunities. Gibson had a strong game. The penalty kill was good. Power play, again, struggling in this one. But all in all, a good effort and a good start to this little bit of a stand here.
Yeah, like you mentioned, probably the only downfall really in this game was the power play. The Ducks had 4 chances. They went 0 for 4. And actually, this whole week they didn't score on their power play, and we'll get to that a little bit with Getzlaf being out for these 3 games. The Ducks also lost the face-off battle, but they did play better this game, much better defensively. Particularly, they got out the early goal by Ritchie in the first period, and they held on to that 1-0 lead really till the very, very end of the game until Casse made it 2-0. So that was good to see. Good to see the Ducks rebound too. That game against Philly was kind of worrisome with all the opportunities. It just seemed like the defense didn't even show up for that game. So this was a good win, especially a little bit of payback because Detroit did beat the Ducks 6-4 in the first meeting, and that's it. We won't be seeing Detroit at least the rest of the season unless something crazy happens in the playoffs, Eddie. But a good way to rebound after a poor defensive game against Philly.
Yeah, and 2 different ways to win a game, too. Obviously, the game against Philadelphia, they had no business winning that game other than the fact that John Gibson and Ryan Kessler led the way for them. And then, like I said, in this one, they got goals from Vermette, Ritchie, and the Casse line, where Vermette grabbing 2 assists, 1 on each goal, and obviously Ritchie and Casse getting the goals in the game. So it's nice to split it up, the offenses. And we actually saw that a lot in all of the games throughout this little bit of a three-game homestand that they had after the Philly game. They weren't getting goals from Perry. Obviously, we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but again, he's on another goal slump and he's not scoring. Raquel also not scoring lately as well. So, it's good to get goals from that line, and then, obviously, again, in the Arizona game, getting goals from Casse again, from Wagner even, and from Cramarosa. So, it's going to be key for these guys to contribute offensively during the season, and they played a big role in getting the Ducks wins during this week.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the Ducks, they also beat Arizona in the following game. Finally, the first overtime 3-on-3 win for the Ducks. The Ducks had lost 7 of their previous 3-on-3 overtimes. And then, of course, they had gone to shootouts 3 times, which they had won 2 out of 3. But they had never won one during the 3-on-3. And like you said, all the young guys coming through, Cramarosa, Wagner, and Casse in the overtime with a great individual effort. That was a pretty crazy play. You saw Mike Smith get the puck after 2 of Fowler's shot attempts. He was trying to pass it, couldn't pass it to anybody. Casse knocks it back into Smith, picks up the puck again, and then shoots it in for the game winner. Which was, a relief because that monkey's off the Ducks' back. I mean, their overtime record is still, not great, but this was a good game. Even though Arizona not doing well, kind of mentioned this in the game preview. They usually come out and do play the Ducks tough. DeClaire was still out there doing his thing. He got a couple assists on both of the goals for the Coyotes. They were without Domi, so we didn't see a rematch of Domi Kessler in this one. Unfortunately, I kind of wanted to see going obviously back before he got injured, but now that he's out, we didn't even get a chance to see that. But overall, this was another good game. The Ducks did win the face-off, Eddie, and they played better defensively, and they pulled this one out in overtime.
Yeah, and like you said, the Coyotes did play them tough in this game. Mike Smith was great, barring the mistake that he made in overtime that gifted the Ducks the overtime win. But he played great in this game up until that point. He stopped 33 shots, and it was just a great game for him. But in the end, the Ducks were able to finally get one. Even though it was a gift, I think they deserved the win in this game. They outshot the Coyotes. They got a little bit of puck luck with the Duclair shot that Gibson tipped off the crossbar and Bieksa cleared off the line. But you're going to have to win games like that, especially at this time of the season. And we always say that no game is easy, even though how bad the Coyotes have been this season. They always play us tough. It's a Pacific Division matchup. It's always going to be a tough game, and to go and get that extra point in overtime for the first time this season is a big point for them.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about that before on the other show, going into overtime 7 times and not winning. And then, of course, it's even bigger when you're playing, Pacific Division teams. I mean, Arizona, obviously, not doing so well. It's not as bad, but still, you want to get those 2 points against the Pacific Division teams if you're forced to go to overtime. You want to win it in regulation, but if that's not able to be the case, then at least get that extra point, and gain that one point in the standings, which the Ducks were able to do. Again, they went without Getzlaf in this game. They won this one, but again, they were 0 for 3, on the power play, so they didn't score there. And then they ended up going into the matchup against Minnesota to finish off this last week here. We saw Bruce Boudreau come back to Anaheim, and this game started out good. The Ducks played a decent first period. Kessler scored his 16th, which he and Raquel are tied for first on the team with 16. Then in the second period, the Ducks kind of had some lapses there in the first 5-6 minutes. Got 2 goals scored on them. They actually had a third one, but it was pretty obvious that was kicked in. But the Ducks just kind of had a bad break there in the second period, Eddie, and they made a big push in the third, but they couldn't get it done. They ended up losing this one 2-1.
Yeah, and they did. Of course, they ended up losing this game, but I think it was key that they played a tight game. It showed that they could keep up with a team like Minnesota, a team that doesn't allow a lot of shots, doesn't allow a lot of goals. That's for sure either. And they're playing Dubnyk, who's been the league's best goaltender this season, if you can believe that or not. And I think it was a tough game. They got into some penalty trouble in the second period, which hurt them. Dumba scored on the two-man advantage, and Spurgeon scored 2 minutes later, although not on the power play, but just after it. And then, when you go down 2-1 to the Minnesota Wild, it's hard to come back. And then that's credit to how well coached this team is this season. Not just Boudreau, but the whole bench staff that they have behind there with Scott Stevens and the other guys that they hired in the offseason. They've done a really good job making this team a Stanley Cup contender this season. And then you've also got probably the best offseason acquisition in Eric Stahl on their team, who's revitalized his career in Minnesota. I mean, he only had an assist in that game, but he had 8 shots, and he played some significant power play and penalty kill time for them. So I think it was a good, close game. The Ducks could have benefited from generating a couple more shots in this game. They only ended up getting 24, and they're outshot 36-24. But it's tough. Like I said, this is one of the best defensive teams in the league. They just hurt themselves with those penalties in the second period, and they couldn't recover.
Yeah, I agree. In the game preview, we talked about Minnesota and their defense. I mean, they give up 2.13 goals against a game. That's the second best in the league. I mean, only the Capitals are better. You look at the penalty kill, they're 85.8%, which is also in the top of the league. They're getting it done defensively 5-on-5. They're getting it done on the penalty kill. And it's just tough. And like you said, with Dubnyk in there as well, he doesn't even average 2 goals a game. He averages, less than 2. So this is a team, like you said, if they're going to get 2 or 3 goals on you, it's going to be tough to win. They're a very good team. The only thing I will say, Eddie, and we all know this, is we'll have to wait and see how Minnesota does in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's usually the case, and even before Bruce was coaching the team, you'd always have to see how they do in the playoffs. They always seem to come in and struggle, and I mean it's probably one of the toughest divisions in hockey right now. The Central Division, you've got the Blackhawks, the Nashville Predators, who always play well. Dallas, who other than this season, have been great the last few seasons. You got the Blues as well, so it's a tough division. But yeah, I mean, especially with Bruce now, you have to see how they do in the playoffs. They get in a couple game sevens. We'll have to see how he'll handle it. But I think they are a legit team this season. You don't win 12 games in a row if you're not a good team. The team they lost their streak to was the Columbus Blue Jackets, who won their 16th game in a row to beat the Wild. So they're a good team. I'm glad that we were able to play them tight. Obviously, unfortunately, we didn't even get a point out of the game, but it shows that we can compete. We just need a couple of tweaks here and there, and hopefully we can get to that same level.
Yeah, I agree, and I think an interesting thing in this week. A lot of people talk about this now because the Ducks didn't have Getzlaf for the last 3 games. They haven't had him for 6 games this season. And it's interesting because some fans are like, oh, we don't need Getzlaf. We're better without him, And then I also hear that about Perry, too. So this is a kind of interesting topic. But what do you think about this whole thing? Getzlaf's been out. The Ducks have been 4-2-0 without Getzlaf. So they've won 2/3 of the games without him. The power play has been terrible. They've only gone 5 for 21 and the power play. And this week they were 0 for 10 without Getzlaf. So what are your thoughts as far as the Ducks, playing without their captain?
I think they're an easier team to match up against. I think we saw that with the dip in face-off wins. You got a lot more relying on Kessler and Vermette to win face-offs. We saw a couple games, the game against Detroit, where you'd expect to win the face-off battle, they ended up losing. I believe they lost the face-off battle against Minnesota, and I also believe they lost it against Philadelphia as well. So when you don't have Getzlaf in the lineup, you lose that ability to match up against tougher opponents. I mean, people have to match up to stop Getzlaf, and then you've also got to match up against Kessler. When you lose that, teams can focus on shutting down Kessler, and then your offense is limited from there. And I think that's why we saw a lot of goals come from the Richie, Vermette, and Cassé line, and Cramarosa chipping in a couple goals. And I think that's why we saw goals come from different sources, because teams only had to focus on shutting down Ryan Kessler. Raquel and Perry struggled in these last 4 games. Raquel is pointless in the last 4 games, and Perry hasn't scored a goal in his last 12. So when they can focus on shutting down the Ducks' hottest player, that's a loss when you don't have Getzlaf in the lineup. And I think people underestimate the impact he has on this team. And yet, yes, he's not going to score a ton of goals, but it changes how teams have to match up. When you look at his name on the lineup, he's the guy you're going to focus on. Him and Corey Perry, the 2 players you're going to focus on shutting down. And that usually gives a lot more freedom to guys like Ryan Getzlaf and Jakob Silfverberg and Antoine Vermette and the other lines on the team.
Yeah, I agree. I think that with Getzlaf out, it's like you said, they don't have to worry about matching up as much. Of course, you've got the Kessler line, which we all know has been the best line for the Ducks this season and really in the last couple seasons. I mean, they've just been, magnificent regular season and for the most part in the playoffs too as well. So I think that is a problem. I do think the power play is a huge problem. Today's practice report, the Ducks did work on the power play today. That was a big issue. Obviously, going 0 for 10. They skated with different lines going, because Getzlaf was out. So they're trying to practice and see if they can get some kind of momentum going without him on there. And he's there to get assists. He's there to make plays. I think the Ducks are not necessarily better, without Getzlaf. Now, if you shift gears and you go to Perry, man, this season he's had a rough season. He's only got 7 goals. He's on pace to average about 14, which we looked at the stats. I mean, you're going back to the beginning of his career when he was only getting in the teens as far as goals. So he's the one that struggled. He hasn't scored in the last 12 games. He's got 4 assists. He had a little unlucky break on that one Camarosa goal where he shot it, but it went off Camarosa's calf or leg or whatnot, went in. But I really think, when people talk about Getzlaf and the Ducks not needing him, I don't really think that's true. I really think it's really more on Perry's side. I think Getzlaf provides playmaking ability. He, gets a lot of assists. Yeah, he doesn't shoot the puck as much as he should, but he's limited the turnovers. We haven't seen as many of the crazy drop passes as we saw last year. So I think the Ducks do still need him. Yeah, they've been 4-2 when he's been out. But he's still the captain. He's still someone to match up against, like you said, especially in the face-off circle as well, the power play. I think those are all the big things. But Perry, I don't know about Perry, Eddie. He's the one that, to me, out of everybody on this team, that I'm really getting concerned about now.
Yeah, and we've seen him do this before, where he's gone on slumps and then he's got back into it and scored a couple goals, and then he's been fine for the rest of the season. But I don't think I remember a time where I've seen him do it twice in one season, where he had that big slump early, then he scored, I believe it was like 3 or 4 goals in 1 week, and then again now he's on a 12-game scoring slump, and it's something we haven't seen him have to encounter before, and he's still shooting the puck. He's leading the Ducks in shots, one above Jakob Silfverberg, but he's still sitting on 7 goals. I mean, Fowler has more, Cogliano has more, Vermette has the same amount as him, Ritchie has more. Yeah, I mean, Getzlaf's only 2 behind him, and he's played 6 less games. It's not a good look right now. I mean, he still has 30 points, which is great. He's turned more into a playmaker this season, but it's not exactly what we need from him, and I think that's what's been disappointing, especially with the fact that Raquel's been slumping lately as well. He only has 2 points in his last 10 games, and 2 of those are goals, and when he's not playing well, Getzlaf is in the lineup, you need your second best player, or who should be your second best player, to step up and start scoring goals. And unfortunately for Perry, he hasn't been able to do that this season. So I mean, it's going to be key to their success if he can play well for the from here on out and then into the playoffs. He's going to need to find a way to put goals into the back of the net.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it comes down to. Like you said, he's going to need to find goals in the back of the net, And the other issue is going to be, Getzlaf did skate today before practice, and so did Nate Thompson. Thompson's still, at least, we think, a month or so away. He's not quite all the way back yet. But with the Ducks and Getzlaf, in the first 3 games without him, they had played Nashville, Pittsburgh, and Arizona. They were, 5 for 9 on the power play, which wasn't too bad. But then these last, week, they went 0 for 10. So, overall 5 for 19. So, I mean, it's not that great on the power play. So it's going to be interesting to see if Getzlaf will be ready to go tomorrow against Dallas. A little bit later in the show, we'll talk about the games coming up this week. But we'll get to some of the fan questions now before we get to all the other news and everything else, and talk about some of the bright spots, some of the good things that have been going on with the Ducks. I mean, obviously they're in first place still. As of the broadcast, they're tied in terms of points with the Sharks. But some of the players that have done well, one of them that Eddie Richard asks about is Kasse, and how impressed are we by him? Did we expect this? And has he earned a permanent spot in the lineup? And I mean, yeah, you have to be impressed with him, Eddie. I mean, he's got 4 goals, 6 assists, total of 10 points in 26 games. He obviously scored a couple this week, a big one, obviously, to get the Ducks the first overtime. I know we were both impressed with him, talking about him before coming up, but I definitely think he's impressed more than at least my expectations.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, he is still playing limited minutes as well. I mean, he's playing, at most 10, 11, 12, 13 minutes per night. I mean, his max in his last 10 games has been 13 minutes, just under 14, and that was an anomaly from against the San Jose Sharks, where he did score a goal and played pretty well in that game. So, in his last 3, he's played just at about 11 minutes, 19 shifts, and he's looked great. I mean, 10 points in 26 games for a guy we didn't even expect to be on the roster this season at all. It's a great start for him. And I think he deserves to stay on the roster for now. I mean, it adds another threat. He's creative. He shoots the puck a lot. He plays well on his own end. So I think he deserves to be on the Ducks right now. And him, Vermette, and Ritchie have developed some chemistry on the Ducks quote unquote third line right now. So I think he deserves to stay. Him and Cramarosa have been impressive this season. They've really added to the Ducks' depth, especially in the last 3 games that they've played without Getzlaf. Cachet has 2 goals and an assist in those last 3 games, and Cramarosa has a goal and a couple points as well. So I think it's been big for the Ducks that these two have been able to step up, especially Cachet, because he really did come out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. He came out of nowhere. Like you mentioned, Cam Rosa's been doing well. Another guy that's been doing well hasn't been getting a lot of points, but it's been none actually, but has been playing well as Montour. He's played in the last 5 games. Obviously, Stoner's been out. Dupre's been out. Theodore went back down. And I've been really watching him a lot, Montour that is, and he's been shooting the puck. And he's been doing a lot on defense. If you notice, he's really feisty around the net, and that's one thing I do like, Eddie. Even though he hasn't gotten points, is you'll see when the opposing players try to come in there and either jar the puck loose or maybe try to make another opportunity. He's usually right there whacking the opposing forward sticks away and whatnot. So I like what he's doing too. He's kind of added a little bit of an element of feistiness and good defense as well for the Ducks.
Well, the thing I've been impressed with too is how well he's been defensively. I think that was the question on his game and how he'd be able to transfer it to the NHL, is if he could play well defensively against professional players. But he's been great in that aspect, and it's actually been the offense that's been missing. But it's not too worrying because we know he has the skill and the ability to score points in the NHL. I mean, he's gifted with that ability. We've seen it in the AHL. We've seen it, this season, last season. We saw it, and when he played in the NCAA as well. So the offense will come when he gets more comfortable playing in the league. I'm just surprised how well defensively he's been, and I think that's the reason he's stuck around for the last 5 games. He seems to be getting more comfortable game by game. He's shooting the puck more. He's got 2 shots in each of the last 3 games. And I think it's a matter of time before the offense comes. He's just got to feel comfortable and established. And, I'm ecstatic that the defense and the presence of mind is already there for a guy this young and for a guy just playing his first 5 games in the National Hockey League. I think it's great for the Ducks that he's taken a huge step forward defensively.
And one other little note about Montour as well is, he got named to the All-Star game for the AHL too as well, Eddie. And, he's obviously been tearing it up down there, leading the league in, shots on goal when he joined the Ducks. He's been playing well. He's been getting goals and assists down there. So he's definitely been a bright spot for the Ducks, and for the goals as well. But, you look at this team, and it's interesting. You see these younger guys coming up, like we talked about, Cachet, Camarosa, Montour. Richie's starting to pile it on with some goals now. And it's interesting. And it kind of leads us to these other fan questions. We have a lot of fan questions about Carlyle and the Ducks, and what do we think about his coaching and the season so far? And I think so far, if we look at it in terms of just the standings, I mean, you have to be happy the Ducks are in first place. They're tied with San Jose. Obviously, they've had some up and down games, and we've gone over that. They've gotten a little bit better defensively in this last 3 games or whatnot. But I think one point that was brought up, especially when Carlyle was in Toronto, was his issue about mixing in with young players. And I think that's not a total non-issue with the Ducks, Eddie. I mean, it seems like the Ducks are relying on these players from the goals, and they're mixing in the lineup well. And I think Carlyle is really doing a good job in that term with the Ducks.
Yeah, I think he's done as good a job as he can with what he's given. And this isn't the team that we had last year. There's no David Perron, there's no Jamie McGinn, there's no Chris Stewart. There's not as much NHL depth on this team, and the fact that Cramarosa and Cachet have been able to come up and play well. Richie's taken a step forward, and he's on pace for about 15 to 20 goals this season. That's a big step forward for those guys, and some guys we didn't even expect to make the roster. So they're kind of making do with what they can right now. And obviously with Perry slumping, that's not on the coaching per se. So, I mean, I think he's done an okay job. I mean, the fact that they're hanging around there near the top of the Pacific Division right now, they're like you said, tied for first. Although San Jose has 2 games in hand, 1 point up on the Oilers, who are right behind them. And I think it's good so far. Defensively, They haven't been as good as they were last year, but of course, it's not Freddie and Gibson anymore. It's just Gibson and then Bernier. So there's a big dip off there in the talent that you have available for you between the pipes. And then the defense is the same as last year. That's the one thing that hasn't changed, and I think that's probably been the most disappointing thing. And I guess you can blame that on coaching. Obviously, like I said, the goaltending isn't there, the depth that we had last year, but I think they've done a good job. It's been a more difficult season, and especially to deal with the personnel they have available at their hands compared to last season. So, I don't give them an A plus, but I think a B. I think they've done pretty well with what they have available.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the biggest concern is really going to be the defense. I mean, like you said, it hasn't changed too much. I mean, obviously Montour's up now for the past 2 weeks, and Theodore was up a little while ago, and then he went back down. So the Ducks have been pulling up down that way as well. But the concern I see too is how are they going to play defensively against some of the stronger teams, and we've seen that, like Pittsburgh getting blown out by, and even Detroit. This last game was better, but the first game they gave 6 goals. So, certain things like that. And it seems like it's certain lapses. I mean, we kind of saw that too in the Minnesota game. The Ducks actually played a really good game against, Minnesota, and they just had that 5-6 minutes where they gave up, technically 3 goals, but one was kicked in. But they kind of fell apart in little spurts there. So I think for the Ducks going forward in this, second half here, I think the biggest thing we've talked about it before is Getzlaf and Perry being separate, which has worked out until obviously, of course, Getzlaf got injured, and then the defense. And this week they've got some opponents coming up, and again, they're very winnable games, Eddie. I mean, they're playing Dallas, Colorado, and Arizona, and then St. Louis on the end of the week on that Sunday. But these next 3 opponents here, I mean, these are teams that aren't doing so well. I mean, obviously we just played Arizona and pulled it out in overtime. But we talked about Dallas before on the show. They're not doing as well this season as we thought they would. And if another team's really struggling, it's Colorado. And of course, all the trade rumors, which we can talk a little bit about that too. But this week, I really think the Ducks should be able to pull out these 3 games. And I think not only should they win, but if they're going to get these things going on defense, they really got to shut these 3 teams down, Eddie. And I'd like to see them, try and only give up 1 or 2 goals, which that's what they did, in these last few games, and has been good. But I hope that they can kind of get it building here in this week, because, later on in the season, we're going to have some tougher games.
Yeah, and Dallas is probably the toughest opponent out of these 3 this week. But like you said, they're all winnable games. I mean, these are the 3 worst teams right now in the Western Conference. They're ranked 12th, 13th, and 14th. Dallas, like I said, is the toughest one, but I think it's a big advantage for the Ducks right now that they're not playing Dallas at home. They're playing their last game of this short little homestand, where Dallas has been awful on the road this season. The only bright spot for the Stars has been their home record, where they're 11-6-4. But this is going to be a high-flying game. It's going to be a wide-open game. It always is when you play the Stars. They give you a lot of opportunities, and I think it's a game that the Ducks should win, and hopefully Getzlaf will be back for this game. I think that will be big for them, because you're going to have to match up against Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn and Jason Spezza, so it'll be key to have their captain and their number 1 center available for this game. But I think it's a winnable game. It will be the toughest one, because like I said, you still do have to deal with Jason Spezza, Jamie Benn, and Tyler Seguin. But the defense for the Stars is a little bit suspect. Their goaltending has always been a shaky spot for them, so that should be a winnable game. And then, of course, you've got the 2 worst teams in the National Hockey League right now, and like you say, it's a cliche, you hear it all the time, but no game is an easy game. But these should be games that the Ducks should be winning. I mean, just looking at the goal differential for these teams, Arizona's -42 and Colorado's -51. I mean, these are games you should be winning, and even though you're playing them in their home arena, and Arizona's 7-10-2 at home, and Colorado's 5-13-1 at home. So I mean, these are 2 games you should win. There's no real weakness that you can point out for either of these teams. They can't score goals. Their defense isn't that great, and the goaltending hasn't been that great for them at all this season either. So I mean, this is as easy as a 3-game homestand you can get during the regular season, and I think they have to take advantage here and at least get points in each of these 3 games.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, you got Arizona, who's another division opponent, like we talked about before. They're towards the bottom, but you want to win that. You got Dallas and Colorado in the other division, and there are games that I'd like to see 6 points out of these. So the only real question is going to be whether or not Getzlaf comes and plays. They're thinking he's going to practice before the Dallas game with the team. We hope, and we'll see how he goes from there. He's just been skating on his own, and he barely even skated at all last week. So that's going to be another factor in there as well. But some other stuff that happened too. We talked about the Ducks and the youth, and we talked about Kase, talked about Camarosa, Montour, and all this other stuff. But if we dig even a little bit deeper too, Eddie, in this last week or so, we had the World Juniors. And how about my man, Troy Terry, huh? USA going all the way winning. We probably should have bet on this game because I would have thought Canada would have won, But what a week. You saw Troy Terry kind of doing his TJ Oshie impersonation against Russia. He gets those 3 shootout goals in a row. They win that game. They go against Canada. It looked like Canada was going to win at 2 different points in this game. They're up 2 separate times by 2 goals, but they went to the shootout, and who's the only guy that scores? Troy Terry. I mean, it's just crazy. It's just crazy to see how this guy's done, Eddie. We're talking about Ducks prospects and players coming up, and this is one that we're going to have to keep our eye on for sure.
Yeah, I mean, originally a 5th-round pick for the Ducks, and I mean, it was a surprise that he actually made the roster to begin with, and he finished the tournament with 4 goals and 3 assists. Obviously, the 2 game-winning shootout goals he has actually for the World Juniors, I think for IWHF, they actually count as goals. So those 2 of those 4 goals were the 2 shootout game-winning goals. But still, I mean, he came up clutch in 2 games where it matters, and you don't see that happen often. I mean, went 4 for 4, and it's not like he changed anything up on any of them. I mean, when he went 5-0 on all 4 of them, I mean, he broadcasted where he was going to go, and he still did it. I mean, it was great to see. Probably the least expected Ducks prospect that we'd expect to do well at this tournament did the best. I mean, Jakob Larsson for Sweden, we expected him to do well, and he did okay for Sweden. I mean, Finland was awful as a whole, and Julius Nattinen didn't have a great tournament for them, but just a great surprise, and really, I mean, hopefully he can come out and play well for the Ducks eventually. I mean, you rarely do see 5th-round picks come out and be an impact on a team, but he had a great tournament for probably you can't really say probably anymore. The best team in the tournament. They won every single game. The U.S. did so, and he played a key role for them. And then he goes out and gets 5 points in his first game back for the University of Denver, 2 goals and 3 assists. So he's had an outstanding last couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, he's been on fire, so much that even Austin Matthews got in on this, and then he got some hot water from the Toronto fans on Twitter, after he's a couple times tweeted out about different things, in relation to USA and Troy Terry. And the last one was funny. He posted 3 USA emoji flags, and then all the Toronto fans got upset, which I thought was kind of funny, Eddie, because that's your home turf, so to speak. But it's just kind of interesting to see everybody's getting in on the action on this, and it's just good. If you watch hockey and you watch the NHL and that's it, I highly encourage you watch other forms of hockey. Watch the AHL, watch the World Juniors, watch some of the other international stuff that goes on. It's a great time. It's just fun all the way around, and especially if you're mainly a Ducks fan, you're looking at the prospects of the Ducks, of course. But if you look at these other players that have come up, the Eichels and the Austin Matthews and those kind of things, it's just fun, I think, to see those players and, get a glimpse of them before they get to either the AHL and then the NHL, Eddie, to see them at these tournaments. It's just fun. It's good. If you really like the sport of hockey, it's something that you should watch.
Yeah, if you're only going to pick one international tournament to watch during the year, I mean, this has to be it. It's always a fun tournament. There's always a lot of surprises. Like you said, you get to see the best young players come up and play every season. McDavid's been in this tournament over the last few seasons. Austin Matthews, Jack Eichel, they all play in this tournament at one point in their career. So it's a great tournament to watch, and it's probably one of the most exciting of the year. And we saw it this year. I mean, there's a lot of surprises. The U.S. winning, I guess, isn't a surprise, but the fact on how they won it and everything was exciting for them. Denmark played outstanding in this tournament. Switzerland was good, and they played a tough tournament as well. So it's always a great tournament to watch, and yeah, it's one that you don't want to miss.
Yeah, and then obviously have to wait till next year for this one. But if you caught it and you saw it, it was exciting. I was watching the USA Canada game, sitting here going, "Oh, they're not going to win this game," and it was really exciting, especially the overtime and the shootout. So something to catch. Some other news that happened too, around the league as well, is the All-Star captains were picked, Eddie, and I don't know if you thought there was any surprises or not, but the captains are Crosby, McDavid, Price, and Subban. Did you think those would be the ones? Any surprises? What are your thoughts?
I don't think it's necessarily surprising. Maybe Subban out of the Central Division beating out the likes of Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves and Vladimir Tarasenko. Maybe that's the most surprising, but it is a popularity contest. They all voted for, so I'm not surprised Crosby won it in the Metro, and I'm not surprised Carey Price or one of the Montreal Canadiens. Maybe the fact that he might have beat out Austin Matthews or Leafs fans in voting for one of their players, but he is one of the most popular players in the league, and he's the best goaltender in the league, so that's no surprise there. And then obviously Connor McDavid in the Pacific Division. Everybody likes Connor McDavid, so it's not a surprise that he was voted in, and he's one of the league's best players this season as well. But yeah, I guess the only surprising one is PK Subban. He is a popular player, so it's not a huge surprise. But when you get voted in over, usually you see one Blackhawk being a captain every season of the Central Division, so it is a little bit surprising, but also I guess kind of refreshing because it's nice not seeing Patrick Kane or Jonathan Taves captain the All-Star team this season.
Well, and both of them, they had a little bit of fun too. There's a photo out there of Kane and Taves, and obviously Kane, Team USA, and Taves, Team Canada, and you have them both wearing the USA jersey, so they must have had a little bit of a wager there. Maybe something you and I can do next season. Maybe we'll see if if a certain team wins or whatnot, one of us will wear the other team's country jersey or whatnot. But yeah, good fun. And the All-Star game should be a blast. It's going to be here in Los Angeles in the Staples Center, so that's coming up towards the end of the month. Also, for we talk about hockey on this show and watching other levels, not just the NHL. They announced today that Fox Channel 5 in San Diego is going to be showing the Gulls games. So that's something to look forward to. I know a lot of people like to stream the games online and whatnot, but if you're in the SoCal area, San Diego region, they're going to have those games on. So look for that. So that's something good, Eddie, because I know a lot of people have asked about, when is the game going to be on TV? And, it's pretty limited. So it's good that, you can see the goals on regular TV down here.
Yeah, it gives a better way for people to actually be able to watch the team other than, like you said, streaming it online or going to the game itself. So it's nice to be able to see them. For me, it's still an issue. I still won't be able to see them, but hopefully it gives me a little bit of the fact that it's on TV means a lot more people will be streaming online, so maybe it'll be easier to see the game that way. But it's great for people in the SoCal and San Diego area.
Yeah, exactly. You get to, a little bit overdue, but finally they got it done. So now you can, watch more of the action as the Gulls play this season. And of course, it's been a little bit rough for them. With having all these players coming up, from the Ducks, it's been tough for them to try to, get anything going because, it just seems like the Ducks have been pulling up so many of these players, Eddie. And now this season, we talked about it too in the beginning. We thought that the Ducks were going to have to pull from San Diego, and now it's becoming a permanent thing. And I do think that these players, like one of our fan questions talked about, Kase being with the team permanently, and I think that's going to kind of be the norm, unless some kind of big trade happens coming up. You and I talked about Colorado was one big team to watch. Obviously, they're not doing as well, and some of the rumors out there, but I don't know. Barring any kind of crazy trade in the next month, I think the Ducks are going to have to rely on San Diego for probably the rest of the season and going forward.
Yeah, it makes sense. It gives them a little bit more flexibility, which we've mentioned before. The fact that now they're not rushing or struggling to make a trade to improve the team offensively. They've actually been pretty good in their goal scoring this season. They're sitting at 113 goals, which is, they're right around, I guess, par. You look at the Blues have 114, Calgary's got 114, Winnipeg 116. Chicago and Minnesota and Edmonton are leading the Western Conference with 120, 120, and 123. So the Ducks are sitting around the top end of the table in goals per game. So they're not really struggling this season, which has been obviously an effective having the goals players come up and have such a big impact. So it gives them flexibility in not having to struggle to make a trade. But yeah, if they end up going for a Landeskog or Duchesne or a Tatar or somebody else that becomes available at the trade deadline, then we might see some of these goals players go down. But at least you have them there, and the depth is there, more depth than we actually expected we'd have at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and that's the key. I mean, especially with, as we talked about in the show, with Getzlaf being out for the week and then Perry not playing as well. So that's something that to look forward to, especially this next week. We'll see, what happens. If Getzlaf's able to return or if he's going to be out for another extended period with that lower body injury. And I guess we'll just wrap up the show. The only other really thing that happened this last weekend is, it was Guy Hebert's birthday. So we want to wish Guy a happy birthday. If you remember, he was the original Duck, the one taken first in the expansion draft by Anaheim. And, of course, he works for Fox Sports now and does a good job over there. So we'll end the show with that. We'll be back in a week, and let's go Ducks.